for Farm Credit of the Virginias, and we are a proud sponsor of the Virginia Country Living Festival. And thank you guys so much for taking your time and coming out today. We are a lender who recognizes that rural living is a lifestyle that requires more than just a bank. You need a lender who understands your way of life and is knowledgeable about your needs. Farm Credit can be found across all 50 states and the country of Puerto Rico, so we are everywhere. And we welcome you to any branch that locally is near you to come speak with one of us. So thank you. And today I have the pleasure of announcing our presenter, Mindy Lipinski, owner of Revercomb Farms, located in Bridgewater, Virginia. Mindy, along with her husband Bobby and 4 boys, moved onto her great-grandparents' home place, which is amazing, and started their venture into all things homesteading, eventually deciding to focus on pasture piglets, poultry, and eggs. In 2021, Mindy left her career as a Merck microbiologist to focus on the homesteader lifestyle and expanding their farm. Mindy also runs and hosts, with the help of her fellow homesteaders, on-farm workshops on a number of topics ranging from animal husbandry and kitchen basics, also to backyard processing. Please help me in welcoming Mindy to the Farm Credit stage.
Can y'all hear me? Hey, my name is Mindy Lipinski. I guess I was just introduced. So this is going to be a pretty entry-level talk into chickens. That's kind of by design, and we'll talk about that here in a minute as to why. But anyway, and we're not going to go, just so you know, we're not going to probably go the full hour. I'm going to do some processing after this, and I'll need to get set up for that. So more of you seasoned chicken people might be even more interested into this, but hopefully I can have some valuable information for you. So the things that we're going to talk about today are, when you get started into chickens, there's a couple things that you need to consider. We're going to talk about the types of chickens, breeds that are better suited to certain needs, starting with eggs, chicks, or pullets. If you're doing the chicks, obviously you're going to need to do some brooding, feed requirements, housing options, we'll do some cost-saving tips, other uses for poultry on the farm and homestead, and then processing. So, before you have chickens of any kind, you need to understand and consider what your end goal is for those chickens. Are you wanting eggs for your family? Are you wanting eggs for your family plus to sell? Do you want meat from those birds? Do you want both? Is this just going to be just for your home use? Are you trying to make a profit from them? So you really have to have a clear answer to that question before you can get started with poultry of any kind. Depending on the answer to that question, then you're going to decide whether you want birds suited more for egg laying, birds are suited more for meat production, or if you're going to settle with a dual-purpose bird that would probably give you both. Other things that you want to consider when you're thinking about what kind of chickens you want and maybe what kind of breeds you want. Weather. Here in Zone 7, we don't have extreme winters, we don't have extreme summers, but there are certainly climates in this area, in the country, that you'll have to consider. If you have a negative 30 winter, then obviously you want something more cold tolerant. If you live out in the desert, obviously you want something more heat tolerant. Housing. Are these going to stay in a coop? Are they going to be pastured? Are they going to go in and out? Depending on what kind of bird it is and its use on our farm, we utilize all of those different housing methods. We'll talk about that more later. And then the temperament of the bird. If you are going to get some chickens and you really want your kids to be involved, you know, there are breeds better suited, they have a better, milder temperament. You know, some of these egg layers are a little bit flighty. They're not going to be great with children. So you have to, consider who's going to be involved with the birds. And so temperament should definitely be in your consideration list of things that you're considering before you even get chickens of any kind. And then lastly, we're kind of going to talk about the pros and cons of industry birds versus some heritage birds. Okay, so you've asked yourself the question, what is my end goal here? So depending on your answer, may depend on the type of breed of chicken that you decide to. Now, arguably, all poultry is edible. So just because it is an egg layer breed doesn't mean that you can't eat it. It just means that it's small, it's a smaller carcass. And you're not going to be able to utilize that bird like you would something, one of the meat breeds. Arguably, any of the breeds in the black could be on the dual purpose list. I just kind of did a basic breakdown of what I thought the list should be. And then the birds in the red are the industry birds. So these are not birds that you're going to be able to perpetuate on your own farm. So if your main end goal is the egg layers. So the first thing people think of when the egg layer are these sex-linked birds. These are the hybrids. These are the things with the color usually in their names. There's the red comets, there's the isotherms, there's the black sex-links. So these are birds designed by the industry to lay a lot of eggs very, very quickly. They're going to start laying a whole lot sooner than the dual-purpose birds, but they're also going to fizzle out faster, so they're not going to have as long as a reproductive life as your dual-purpose birds. Some of the other breeds, the Slangadix, the Leggers, the White and True, Blue or Green, Americana Easter Eggers, these are all great birds. They're great layers. So if egg laying is on your major, what your expectation for your birds, then all of those options plus more. There are a million types of birds would be great options for you. Meat birds, this is what we do on our farm. We raise out the Cornish crosses. Those are those white industry birds that get super, super big, super quick. They are not found in nature. These are industry birds. So they grow out quick, they process quick. As far as feed to weight conversion, you can't beat it. They're going to get super, super big. They're going to utilize that feed into their carcass weight super faster than any of the dual-purpose breeds. Second to that would be anything with the rangers in their name. So the Red Rangers, the Freedom Rangers, stuff like that. They're going to grow a little bit slower, but they are meat birds. They were designed to get really, really big, and their processing weight really, really fast. And then the Jersey Giants and the Brahmas, you could put them on the dual-purpose list. They will lay eggs. They will self-perpetuate. However, these are bigger chickens with bigger carcasses. So in my mind, I think of them as a meat breed, but you can easily make an argument that they are a dual-purpose breed. Now, if the answer to your question is you want something for your family that does eggs and meat, then probably you would want to consider one of the dual-purpose, the homesteader breeds. So these are going to be, a little bit bigger chickens, they're a little bit hardier, and you get eggs and you get meat. So the most popular breeds, Rhode Island Reds, the New Hampshires. I say breezy. Margaret will call these breasty. I don't know how you say that word. Asperwolves, the Plymouth Rocks, the Wyandottes, the Worthingtons. So these are going to be great birds. You can process the roosters. The hens will give you eggs for years to come. And then when the time comes, you can also utilize them into meat for your meal. Okay, next option. You know what your end goal is with your birds. You have a breed or breeds that you've decided on. How are you going to get started? So you can get hatching eggs, you can start with chicks, or you can do pullets, something point of lay, or adults. So a lot of people think, well, I'm going to save money. Yes, can I hear you? Just use the mic. say no. They say no. They say no. 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 Yes. Yes. Good. All the way in the back. We got some really. Yes. Y'all good? Y'all good? Perfect. Do I need to go back? Are we good? Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, well, the one thing I was going to say at the beginning and I forgot to say is my website and my contact information, well, it was on the slide, but also am set up as a vendor booth. So if there's any information that you need, including a copy of this entire presentation, I would be happy to send it to you if there's pertinent information that you found useful. So please do not hesitate to reach out to me and request that information. Okay. And there are headphones for y'all really, really hard hearing people in the back. But anyway, so if you want headphones, because you are having still a difficult time, let them know they've got those available at the station. Going back. Okay. Breeds. Where to start? So a lot of people are like, well, hey, I want to do this as cheaply as possible because I ain't paying $7 a chick. So I'm going to start with hatching eggs. That's an option. Can you get hatching eggs for free? You sure can. Or you can pay a whole lot of money for some purebred specialty breeds. But things to consider. You can. Okay. Thank you. So you find a farmer down the road, somebody with a rooster and a couple of hens, you get some eggs for free. You can do that, but just consider too, your average hatch rate is only going to be about 50 to 70%, 50 to 75%, that's on average, and that's with 100% fertility rate, which natural fertility with a rooster and hens is not at 100%. You're looking at 55 to 65%. I was in the sciences, I hated math, so I don't know what that math is, but 50% of 50% doesn't seem like a great hatch rate to me. But it's fun. Who doesn't like to hatch chicks? I've tried it, failed miserably, but it's definitely an option, and a lot of people who do it get really good at it, and it's certainly fun. Or if you have maybe you picked a specialty breed, you paid a lot of money for some eggs, there's probably going to be a better hatch rate for those types of birds. But you start with hatching eggs. Obviously, the supplies on top of the feeder and the water that you're going to need no matter where you start, and on top of the brooder and the heat source that you're going to need whether you start with hatching eggs or chicks, you're also going to need obviously an incubator. Your eggs, they're going to hatch out straight run, meaning you're going to get a mix of hens and roosters. So if you just want eggs for your family, then you need to consider that you're hatching out straight run chicks, and roosters don't lay eggs. And then there's a long waiting period, so you've got to get those things to production age. So you're going to wait 21 days for them to hatch, and then you're going to wait 4 to 6 months for them to be of a production age. Most people start with chicks. You can find chicks at many, many different places, and obviously depending on where you source them from, the costs for that. You can pay a couple dollars a chick. You can pay good money for chicks, just depending on what you're looking for. Around here, especially, and maybe it's like this everywhere, I don't know, I've never lived anywhere else, especially the time of year, if the time of year is right going into the spring, then you can find chicks pretty much anywhere. Maybe you have some friends that just let some of their hens go broody. Craigslist, they're all over Craigslist. You can find them locally in the feed stores, Tractor Supply, local farms. Shameless plug, Open Door Homestead, which I work closely with and doing a bunch of our workshops. She hatches out eggs, and so she has chicks available a lot of the time. And then of course you can always source from the larger hatcheries. So these are like the Myers and the McMurrays and stuff like that. I would just be careful where you get your chicks from, because that is important. I've never bought chickens off of Craigslist, and if you sell chickens or buy chickens from Craigslist, it's not necessarily bad, but I would be careful, just like any other animal. You want to know where your animals are coming from. So there is value in being able to go to the farm to see how they're raised, to see how they raise their animals, and then you can really consider whether you want to bring any type of animal, whether it's a chicken or a pig or whatever. If you want to bring an animal that was raised in those conditions onto your farm, so there is value in that as opposed to, I don't know, meeting somebody in a parking lot, I guess. The larger hatcheries, they're going to be, held to those standards. I know that they have to be like, disease-free, and so you can be sure that if you're buying from a hatchery, that you're going to get, quality chickens that are free of any underlying problems and parasites. The one thing too to also consider, especially right now as we're in this avian influenza era, and it is in the valley, very much so, is you want to be very careful going from poultry farm to poultry farm, or going to a poultry farm and then potentially bringing that stuff back onto your farm via your boots. So if you're going out sourcing poultry and you've got poultry at home, then I would probably definitely recommend wearing shoes that you don't usually wear out into the yard, just as a conscientious, not disease spreading. Supplies, again, you're going to need a brooder, you're going to need a feed source for your brooder, and then a feeder and a water. And then the wait time is almost as long as the hatching eggs, but unless you have chicks that are like auto-sex, so as soon as they hatch out, based on their coloring, you can sex them, you're going to be waiting 4 to 6 months before they're old enough, before you can tell a lot of times if you have a hen or a rooster, and you're going to get any type of return on your investment. And then lastly, the most expensive option, but it is an option, and maybe it's a great option for you, is to buy something that's already at point of lay or close to it. Obviously, of the three options, this is going to be the most costly. You can source them a lot of the same places that you can source the chicks. But the upside is they're going to be already sexed and they're going to be ready to produce for you. So if you want to do the chick route, then you're going to need a brooder space for them, and you're going to need a heat source for that brooder space. Depending on the size of the chick, depends on how big that space is. And I do want to make a point here. My forte is definitely with the meat birds. I do have layers, mostly because people expect me to have eggs for sale with my chicken. I don't keep an overabundance worth of layers, probably under 100 most of the time. But if you are doing any of the meat bird breeds, like the industry meat bird breeds, just know that a lot of these timelines that I have, if I don't have it broken down, like they're going to be super accelerated, because these things are like chickens or jet fuel. So if you are brooding chicks, I put in here 0 to 4 weeks, you need a half of a square foot per chick. I would say for meat birds, and probably 0 to 2 weeks for that size. 1 square foot per chick, anything 5 to 8 weeks. My chicks my meat chicks are not in the brooder 5 to 8 weeks. They're out 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the season, if I can get them out, because they get super big super quick. So I guess these timelines would be probably more for your dual purpose or your egg layers. And then double that size again to 2 square feet per chick for 8 to 12 weeks. So you really want to have an end game in mind when you go to construct your brooder, because you don't want to outgrow that space too quickly. How long to brood? Generally speaking, until they feather out. Like I said, I keep my meat birds in the brooder. I like to have them out by 2 weeks, or at least in a step-up brooder at 2 weeks, just because they get super, super big, super quick. But they'll need to be feathered out before you can take them out of the brooder box and offer their supplemental heat. Temperature, I started around 95 degrees for the first week and then roughly dropped down about 5 degrees every week or so, again, until they're fully feathered. And you can kind of mess around with this. I mean, it really depends on the weather. On my brooder box, I've got windows that I can kind of open and close to better regulate their heat. Because obviously I don't need as much heat in the summertime with the outside air as I do in the wintertime. They need to be safe, they need to be secure, they need to be secure for predators because everything likes chickens. So you want to make sure that the rodents can't get in there. I've had rats get into my brooder and try to pull my chicks through a little hole that they came into. Cats, I know Margaret had an unfortunate incident with her barn cats the other week in her chicks. Dog proof. Yeah, I've got stories about dogs, wildlife. So these things are very, very vulnerable, and not only do you need to keep them secure just so you can maintain their temperature, but you also need to make sure that you can keep predators out. Feed. Any type of, it doesn't matter if you have a meat bird, an egg layer, or a dual-purpose bird. You want to start them out on a good quality chick starter that's going to be at a higher protein, usually about 20%. That can vary a little bit depending on where you source your feed from, and you want it to be a milled feed because they're little, they can't eat a big pellet. So you want to make sure that you're starting out, and most of the, if it says chick starter on it, it's going to be a higher percent, and it'll most likely be milled. If you've got one of the slower growing, like the layer or the dual-purpose breeds, then you can keep them on a chick starter for about 2 months. I keep the meat birds on a chick starter for about 2 weeks until I bump them down in protein. For the dual-purpose birds, about 8 weeks to point of lay, you can bump down their protein just slightly, about 18% or so. For the meat birds, 2 weeks of age until processing, which is anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, I keep them on a broiler ration, which is about 18%. And then with your layers or your dual purposes, you want to keep them on a layer ration. A lot of times that's like a 16% feed, and supplement with calcium for good egg production. And then supplements, I don't do a whole lot with this. Really, if you are all into the supplements and all of the different things you can do, definitely talk to Margaret about this. But chicks, especially stressed chicks that have just come in from shipping, like maybe from a big hatchery, or they've come in from, you've got them from Tractor Supply, like these chicks are under an immense amount of stress. They've been shipped, and then they've been put in these stores, and they've been handled by who all knows. So it's never bad to just go ahead and add an electrolyte pack or a vitamin pack to their water, especially for the first week or two. And you can find those anywhere, Tractor Supply, any of the feed stores. They're pretty readily available and easy to find. And then you can also add some apple cider vinegar at a dilution of 1 tablespoon per gallon to their water after you're done with the electrolytes and vitamin pack, just as an extra boost. Okay, so you've got the chicks, you've got them to adulthood, so now their feed requirements. Depending on what kind of chicken you have, like we discussed earlier, that their feed requirements are going to be a little bit different. If you have chickens that are, these egg layer chickens, standard, you want a 16% layer ration. Give them calcium as an extra supplement. You can just pour it out into a little pan, keep it in their yard. They'll take it as they need it. Some grit available. I have that starred, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then I always give my egg layers a little extra protein to get them through the winter, to keep their egg laying going up while they slow down for winter production. Meat birds, they're going to stay at a higher protein because they need a lot of that protein for muscle development. So they're usually about an 18% ration, and you can also add extra protein and supplement with some kelp and bone meal. Margaret does all of that stuff, so she'd definitely be the person to talk to with more in-depth information on that. And then if you have dual-purpose birds that are laying eggs for you now, and you're probably going to process them in a little bit, you can keep them at a 16% layer ration, the same as the egg layers, with the calcium and the grit and the extra protein. So the grit is starred. It is always a good idea to have your chickens access to grit. Obviously they don't have teeth, that's how they're going to grind their food. But don't discredit how much natural grit that they can find in the ground if you have pasture poultry. So depending on what kind of birds they are and where they are, how much grit I offer them, I personally fluctuate, but it's never going to be a bad idea to always have that available to them, because again, they're going to need that to break down their food. Housing requirements. We do pastured poultry, but depending on the time of year and the type of chicken, we have and do utilize all three of these different types of methods of housing. So you can keep your chickens in a coop, maybe with or without access to an outside run. You can keep them on pasture, or you can totally free range them. Obviously, coop-kept chickens, you're going to have complete control over them, and you're going to have the most control of protection from predators that way. The con is chickens are destructive and they are messy. They can't forage for bugs or green material. So you either need to be cleaning out that coop every week and giving them fresh bedding, or implementing a deep bedding system, which is what I tend to do because I don't like to clean out a coop every week. And then, they're not out foraging for bugs or green material, so they are lacking those in their diet, or you are supplementing yourself with sprouts or fermentation or greens that you're growing for them. So basic space requirements for coop-kept chickens, which is really hard to say. 2 to 3 square feet per chicken. If these are egg layers, then obviously you're going to need nesting boxes and perches. You're going to need good ventilation, so you don't have a buildup of gases in there. If they have access to a run, then you're going to have a door for them to get in and out of their run, and then there's going to be obviously a door for you to get in and out to take care of them. So my layer hens, I don't do bee birds over the winter. My layer hens, I will pull them off of the pasture in the late fall, and I keep them in a hoop house, which is a coop. And they do have access to a yard, so that's how I keep my laying hens that I am overwintering in a system like that. I do put them off the pasture. Pasture birds, which is what all of our chickens are in the season, spring, summer, and fall. They have access to seasonal grasses and insects, so they're getting some extra minerals, extra proteins that they're foraging themselves. And if you manage them, meaning you move them from place to place, they are good for the soil, so they're going to be tilling up the grasses, fertilizing as they go, and eating pests. The con is you do have to manage them. So, our meat birds, those birds on steroids, they get super, super big, super, super quick, and they are messy birds. So I've got to be moving my meat birds twice a day, which is a lot of work in the growing season. But otherwise, they're going to get unhealthy for being on nasty soil. I'm going to be ruining my soil, and I'm going to be really killing my microbials in the soil. Space requirements, 2 to 4 square feet per chicken. Again, if you've got your layers out, they're going to need a nesting box, and they're going to need a place to perch at nighttime. And you need to have some sort of protection from the weather. So we do, for the meat birds, we have Salatin style coops, so they can have access to the sunshine and stuff through the wire, but there's also a place in their tractor where they can get out of the elements, out of the wind, out of the rain. And on our farm, we also have a decent amount of free-range chickens. So these are chickens that do not stay where they're supposed to. So they just kind of, I'll let a certain amount of free ranges around the farm. They do have some benefit, but you have to be careful depending on your situation. So these birds, they're totally self-sufficient. I do not feed them. They find all of their food themselves, just milling around the farm. They do a good job cleaning up after the animals. So if I'm out feeding the pigs, they're going to be out on around the food troughs, scratching up, cleaning up after the pigs. They're going through the fields, they're cleaning up after the animals. We've got dogs. I've got I did not, on wood, had a problem with fleas and ticks for many, many years since I let a certain population of our chickens free range. But the con of that is, if you count on them for eggs, then it's Easter egg hunt every single day, unless you know where they're laying. And a lot of times if you find where they're laying and you take all their eggs, and they'll just pick a new spot. So it's always a guessing game. Going to go where they're not supposed to go. So if you have a garden, that's where they're going to go. If your neighbor has a garden, that's certainly where they're going to go. If you have a covered porch, they're probably going to be up there too, making a mess. And they're the most susceptible to predators this way, obviously, because they have no protection for things that are trying to eat them. So the requirements, if you want free-range chickens, you have to have a larger area so they'll have the space to roam. You really need some understanding neighbors for when they get into that garden, and some very good dogs that are not going to eat your chickens, because we've had all of those situations happen. Okay, so I am the world's biggest cheapskate, and I am always trying to penny when I can. You can ask my husband. So some things that you might want to consider to save a couple bucks when you're getting started for their housing. There is not a building on our farm that I have ever torn down and not utilized in some way. We have moved sheds, we have cut holes in sheds, we've cut doorways in sheds, like all of the old structures on our farm, like the old smokehouse, the old, I don't know what all these buildings were, but we had no use for them. Much to my husband's chagrin, we have screwed them together the best we can and drug them across the farm and put them where they needed to be, and we have utilized them for housing for our pigs and our chickens. So there's certainly value in that. You can get those coop kits, I guess, at the Tractor Supply. They're very, very small, super cute, but they're going to be costly, and they're going to be small, and they're not going to hold up to the elements. You get a 150-year-old shed that your great-great-granddaddy built. You put some boards and some screws in it, it's going to last another 100 years. The auction, I found some great, at the new house that I'm using now, I found it at auction. So I'm always on the lookout for stuff like that. And then build your own. You can YouTube anything and build anything, and it's going to be better quality. It's going to be the size that you need it to. It's going to be a whole lot cheaper than those kits that they sell in the big box stores. For feed, you should not have scraps, compostable kitchen scraps, or scraps from your, when you're cleaning out the fridge at the end of the week. If you have chickens and or pigs, they should not be going into the trash. All of that stuff can go to the chickens. You can ask your friends, family, co-workers for their food waste. No joke, true story. I was the person, I had, the couple dozen eggs underneath of my arm, walking into Merck, and I was the person trucking out, the Walmart bags full of waste, because I had people, cleaning out their refrigerator. Totally taking it out of work. I was totally taking it out of work. I'm sure the security guards were wondering what I was up to, but I didn't let any of that go to waste. I utilized it all for for my chickens or pigs. And note, I wouldn't get too hung up. This is me talking. This is a personal opinion. If you Google it, there are certainly things that they say that you're not supposed to feed your chicken. Actually, there are certain things that they say that you shouldn't feed, all of the animals. I have never had a problem, I don't pick through the waste. I kind of put it out there, and animals in general are a whole lot smarter than people. They don't try to eat things that they're not supposed to eat. So, yeah, if you locked your chicken up and you only gave it this, this thing that was super poisonous to it, would it eat it? Well, probably, eventually it would have to or it would die. But usually the animals are pretty smart, so they will scratch through, they'll take what they need, they'll take what they want, and they'll leave the rest. So I just kind of threw it out there in the yard. I wouldn't put it in their feeders. I would just kind of throw it out there in the yard, and I'd let them decide what they wanted and how much of it they wanted. And I've never had an issue doing it that way. Also, don't overlook local businesses. I have a great setup right now where I visit a pretty decent sized produce stand. I'm there every single day through the growing season. I'm there once a month or once a week in the non-growing season because they also have a bakery. But I'm picking up all of their discards from the bakery. I'm picking up all of the discards from their produce. I'm picking up all of those waste and I'm feeding it out to the animals. And then there's a good amount of things that you can produce yourself. Like I'm super excited. I have my first colony of black soldier flies started. Husband, not so much excited about the maggots I'm growing in the greenhouse. Forages, there's a bunch of stuff that you can easily grow and offer to your chickens. You can also stretch your feed with fermentation and sprouting techniques. And then other uses for the homestead or for poultry on the homestead.
Attention. Lori Moore, please come to the front desk. We have found yourself a composting.
Chickens are a great asset in a composting program, and I do utilize them for that purpose. Like I said earlier, they're great fertilizers. So they're walking around, they're eating, and they're pooping as they go, so they're fertilizing the ground. Working up the garden bed, at the end of the season, you fence that off. I turn in the chickens, and then I turn in the pigs. I use both of those animals to prep my garden bed for the next spring. We talked about it earlier. They're great for parasites, because they're eating all of the things that they can find, and they're great for cleanup. So they definitely do a good job cleaning up after the other animals. Okay, and so then here's the part that people don't like to talk about, right? So there's going to be an end to the chicken life. Will that be a natural end? Will that be an unnatural end? That is something that you have to have decided before you even get started, because I know lots and lots of people that will keep their hens until they die of a ripe old age. That could be 5 years, that could be 8 years, that could be 10 years, I don't know, because I don't do that. But if you want to do that, that is totally fine. But just know their productivity will end long before their natural life is. So are you going to keep them as pets, or are you going to, put them to use for other uses for your family? There is no right or wrong answer to that, but that is a question that you have to have answered before I would even get started into this. So depending on the type of birds that you have, depends on how soon their productivity is going to wane. So if you have egg layers, they will lay for years and years and years, but pretty much after 9 to 12 months, most people, even the pastured poultry producers that keep their egg layers out of pasture, they're going to turn over those birds, after 9 to 12 months, just because their productivity drops off so much. These are going to be smaller carcass birds. They could be a little bit older, so they're going to be good for soup. You can turn them into soup hens, broth, stock, stuff like that. And dog food. I do a good amount of processing and utilizing our chicken processing waste and our cold roosters and old layers. I turn them into dog food a lot just because we have a lot of dogs. Meat birds, they're going to be ready to process depending on if you have what kind of industry birds you have, or if you do a dual purpose meat bird. 6 to 12, maybe even longer if you get more of a heritage breed. But anyway, they're going to be ready to process 6 to 12 weeks, and those birds will be used. They're useful obviously for food because they are meat birds, but you can utilize them a number of different ways. And dual-purpose birds, the ones that you're growing out for meat, they're probably going to be ready closer to 18 to 20 weeks. Dual-purpose layers, their productivity is really going to drop off after 2.5 years or so. I think is a good average. And then depending on how old that bird is decides how you can utilize that bird. Whether they're going to be good for eating because they're a relatively young bird at 20 weeks, or it's an older hen that you're culling that you're going to turn into a soup hen or dog food. Okay. And some other resources. So like I said in the beginning, this was a really entry-level overview in chickens, and that's kind of by design because we, on our farm, we do a lot of workshops. And actually next weekend, conveniently, we have scheduled a backyard chicken workshop at our farm in Bridgewater. So that's going to be a deeper level look into all of the things chicken, beef birds, egg layers, whatever you're looking for. Margaret's going to be there. She is definitely the crazy chicken lady, so she can answer all of the questions. And she's certainly my resource for any information that I need. So Margaret at Open Door Homestead, she's just down the road from me in Harris Cage. She's also a great a local resource. If you look online, everybody's got chickens. Everybody has an opinion. There are so many online resources. But specifically, I like Justin Rhodes. He's kind of a bigger deal now with all things homesteading than what he used to be. But he used to be exclusively the crazy chicken guy. Carl Hammer is another person I found extremely interesting. He's got I think he feeds like a flock of 600 birds exclusively on compost, which is super, super cool. And then more of a homesteading level, Sean and Beth Dougherty, they are in Ohio. They've got a bunch of written literature, and you can also, I think, find them online. Sal's Ear Farm, Sal's Ear Homestead, something like that. Anyway, they do a lot of cool stuff as far as, I think that they grow 95% of the things that they give all of their animals, which I think is really fascinating. And I'm always trying to change and be a little bit more self-sufficient than I was. That's all I've got information-wise. So I'm going to go, once we're done here, I'm going to be doing some processing out the door. So if that's not your forte, do not go out the door immediately. But we will follow up with that for people who are interested. Are there any questions that I can answer? Try to answer? Yes. Beginner mistakes to avoid for first-time chicken owners. Not getting overwhelmed. Not having too many too fast, because that thing that they call chicken math, it's a thing. 8 years ago, I had 4 chickens in the backyard, like for real. And now we're gonna process about 1,000 chickens on our farm this year, and I don't keep about 100 or so layers. So get a manageable number based on what your end goals are. If you've never had chickens before, then only, just try to keep your family in eggs or meat or whatever your intentions are, and just start, whether that's 2, 4, 6. Just get a couple and just see how it goes. I would probably not discourage you. I think that, doing chicks up through, through adult, that's the way most people go. But if you are brand new, then maybe you don't want to start with chicks. Maybe you want to start with pullets and just, kind of see what that looks like, and then you know what you have, and you have a manageable number. But yeah, just start small, because 10, 12, 20, I mean, they're messy, and if you're not managing them, then they can certainly take over your life. So. Well, if you were raising poultry for meat, I mean, I market pastured poultry, but what most things that you buy in the grocery store is 100% confinement. So there is no right or wrong answer, like to how you should raise what specific type of bird, but it seems to me that you're going to go through the money, the heartache, the work of getting an animal to process that you're going to feed your family. If you didn't really consider how you got it there, then you might as well just buy it at the store, because it's going to be a whole lot simpler, it's going to be a whole lot cheaper, and it's going to be a lot less work involved in it. So I think that, if you can get those chickens out, you can get them on pasture, they're going to be, out there doing their happy chicken things, and they're going to be a benefit to you. They're going to be helping you, maybe they're helping you in the garden, maybe they're helping you, with just your general soil fertility, and I think they're just going to have a better product. But yeah, like you shouldn't do this. Like I think I kind of chuckle a little bit when people are, when the price of eggs went so crazy and people are like, I'm going to start raising my own egg layers so eggs won't cost that much. Yeah, no. If money is your end goal, no. Any more? Yes. So, I'm at the end. So come find my vendor table. I've got business cards with my email address and my website. And if you would like a copy, I can just send you this entire PowerPoint presentation. I don't mind to. So just shoot me an email and let me know. If you have additional questions, if I can answer them, I'm happy to. If not, I want to totally kick it over to Margaret. She seems to have a lot of answers. She's very, very passionate, especially on the nutritional side of things. And if us two can't figure it out, then we would be happy to help dig until we found an answer. But yeah, give me an email and I'll be glad to give you any of this information, including this PowerPoint presentation.